Right, hello everyone. Welcome to another session of computer science lessons. We will be working today on the idea of file handling in Python. So last lesson we were looking at the different methods used to interact with lists in Python, and we were looking at how to use loops in interaction with lists, and we were trying to look at understanding how to search for individual items from lists. Now, um, the today's lesson, we're going to be looking at file handling, and one of the things that we'll be doing, so to understand how to read a file in Python, but also to understand how to convert a file's contents into a list so that you can actually use it for other purposes. Okay, um, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Please let me know if you've turned up, who you are, all of that kind of thing. One of the things I am going to mention is I would like you to actually interact with these lessons a bit more, because at the moment I'm not really getting a lot from certain members of the classes. So it would be good to see a little bit more interaction and for you to submit your work onto Show My Homework. I know if quite a few of you have done that, but it would be good to see more of that. Okay, so looking at how to read from a text file. Before we can read from a text file, we need to actually make sure we've set up a text file to read from. So we need to have created a text file and saved it in the right place. Now, on Trinket, you can upload a file, or you can even tell Trinket to create a file itself. But using Thonny or Python idle, you need to make sure you know where the file is saved in relation to the Python code you're creating. So I'm going to show you what I mean by this in a moment. So it's usually easiest to keep that text file in the same place as that .py file, the Python file that you're working on. So I'll show you what it looks like in Trinket first. So in Trinket, if I zoom in a little bit, because you might not be able to see all of that, you've got this plus button here, which actually just says create text file. So you can click on that, give it a name, file.txt, whatever it is. In fact, let me just edit that. File.txt. If it doesn't have an extension, it won't actually be saved as anything in particular. Or you can upload a text file, and I'll get to that in a moment once I've created one. So the other option is if, say, we're in Thonny and we're creating our program in here, we're going to be saving this into, say, I've got a USB drive ready to get it saved into. Oh, I need to actually give it a name, of course. Reading files. Okay, and you can see in the background I've created readingfiles.py. Now, one of the quick ways of doing this is by right-clicking and clicking New, and then Text Document. So you can do that, New Text Document, and then call it, I don't know, file.txt, like we called the other one. And then you can double-click it to open it. It's just opened over here, so I'll bring it over, and then you can write whatever you want in it. So line 1, line 2, line 3. Okay? Make sure I spelled everything correctly. Okay, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that a bit better. So hopefully you can see that these are both being stored in the same place. This needs to be the case when you're back at school and you're using Thonny again. You need to make sure that any text files that you are saving are in the same place as what your Python file. Now you can obviously download Thonny or even idle, as in Python idle. That's the other way of doing it. So you can open up Python idle. I'm just waiting for that to load. So I've got Python idle here, and I've got Python shell, which again has appeared over here. So this is where you've got two different things, but you can do that by just Googling either Thonny or Python idle, and you'll find them relatively quickly usually. Okay, so I've got that. Can you see at the top here it's got a little star next to it? That means it hasn't been saved. So if it hasn't been saved, it can't be accessed by that Python file, and it means that that Python file won't actually be able to read the things I've got. So I need to actually save it, and I also need to close it, because if it's still open, it's a bit like when you're trying to open a file that someone else is currently working on on a network. You'll get a big error come up and saying it won't work. It's effectively the same idea, but Python finds it a little bit harder to work with than that. So I've kind of explained to you how you need to make sure it's all set up, but what is the syntax we need to be using to actually read from a Python text file, a text file in Python? So we've set it all up. Trinket, you can create your text file in Trinket. In Thonny or Python, you need to make sure you know where the file is being saved. This is what we're looking at here. So with open, and I've created a text file called example.txt, and then I've got R, I'll get back to that in a moment, as file, and then I've got my colon, indent, and then print brackets file.read, open close brackets, close brackets. Okay, so I'm going to go through bit by bit on exactly how this works, because you'll look at this and go, how's this work? I don't quite understand. So when you're working with a file, or while you are working with a file, you use Python's with keyword, and you've got your colon and indentation like you do with an if statement, or you do with a for loop or that kind of thing. And this makes sure that the file doesn't stay open when it is finished being used. So while you are using the file with that, with the time that you are having it open, it will do certain things, and then once it's finished all the code that's in that indented section, it will close the file. Now this is a bit like I was saying earlier with if you have the file open and you don't close it, then it will cause some issues and some errors later down the line of saying it's already open somewhere else. So this is why we need to use it like this. The next thing we've got is we've got this word open, which is kind of obvious what that does. It opens a file. So we type in the name of the file, so example, and then what type of file it is, so .txt. Obviously you're used to seeing other kinds of files as well, for example .doc, .png, whatever. Now Python is able to work with other files as well, but just to make it a little bit simpler to read from, because other kinds of files are a bit more complicated to read from in Python, we're just going to work with text files for the moment. Okay. Then we've got this letter R. Now R is actually just telling the computer, or telling Python, that we're going to be reading from the file. This is why we have the letter R after that file name and file type. R means read. Other things you could do with a file are writing to it, or appending, which is adding to the end of it. And then we've got this as a file. So the as keyword allows you to set a variable name for the file. So this file has been opened and it's going to be called file. That's just the name that we're giving it. We could call this whatever we want. We could call it elephant. We could call it raspberry, whatever we wanted to call it. So it's opening the example.txt as a file, and it's going to print out that whatever is in that file. So it's reading what is in the file, and this syntax is very specific to files. Okay, it's reading what's in the file, and what it's actually doing here is saving it as a string, because a file in itself is not a string, it's a file. It's if you have a text file, even if everything in that text file is a string, if you try to print out file without saying file.read, it would look very different. So I'll quickly show you an example of what that might look like if you were to print out file instead of file.read. So I'm going to with open, and then we called it file.txt, didn't we? Ooh. And then comma r, and then close brackets, as file. Again, I could call this whatever I want, so I might actually call it something different here, as text. Yeah, print, and then because I've called it text, I'm going to say text. If I was to print out text, just text, and run it, it gives me this here, IO text wrapper file.txt mode R encoding blah 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 blah. That's complicated, and it's basically just saying this is what the reference to the file itself. If we put in file text.read open close brackets, because that we're using a function here, so we need those brackets. We run that instead, it prints out line 1, line 2, line 3, like we created earlier on that text file that we have in the same place. Now you can actually save them in slightly different places. You could just put in something like C:/ etc. You can put in the file, the full file name in there to be able to read it from a very specific place. But generally, it's a good idea to try and keep it in the exact same folder as you're working from, so you don't have to type in the full file name. Okay, so let's continue from there. So we've got file.read. So we're printing out the contents of a file. Here's another example. This is what it would look like if we had example.txt set up like this in Notepad. This is what it would get printed out in Python. Now, if I was to just open this up again and just double click open, I think it appeared and then disappeared. So what I'm quickly going to do is put in an input statement at the end here, just so that it doesn't disappear so quickly, and then save that. And then if I double click this and I bring this over here, it shows me line 1, line 2, line 3. It's literally running that that program that I've just created as an exe file, okay, which is what happens when you double click on these instead of right clicking edit with whatever. Okay, so let's move on. So that's reading from printing out the contents of a file. Okay, now sometimes you might want to remember the content of a file for later, but not keep that file open the entire time. So you might, this doesn't look particularly useful at the moment, but it will become a lot more useful later down the line. Say you had a load more code in between, and you wanted to be able to do something with your file in between, but you wanted to save what was in it beforehand, then you can print out the content of the file. So it will do the exact same thing as it did before, printing out that file content, but you can save it. You can save that string, those string values, rather than the what was it? This IO text wrapper type thing. Those will be saved in a variable, and that can be very useful. And it means that you don't have to keep that file open all the time, which is good for your computer because it's not having to deal with working with different files at the same time. And it's good practice generally. And I know at this stage, opening one extra text file isn't a huge deal, but when it comes to creating bigger things in the future, it can really make a big difference, all of the extra things that you've got. Okay, so printing out file content, just using a variable name. Again, this could be called whatever. It doesn't have to be called file content. It could be called marshmallow, whatever, as long as you are using the same name both times. This is how we use variables, remember. Okay. So if we want to read only one line at a time, we can use read line, open close brackets, instead of read. So if we were to run this piece of code here, which had file.read, everything's the same apart from file.read line instead of file.read. So I've just added 4 letters here. You can see that only one line has been printed out. Okay, it's not actually printing out all the lines, it's just printing out one line. Okay, and then if you do the same thing again, if you write the same thing twice, it will actually go on to the next line from there. It'll keep track of which lines you have already read. Now, if you were to type in file.readline without the print statement, and then have a different print statement which did have that, then it wouldn't print the first line, but it would print the second line. So I'll show you an example of that as well, opening up Thonny. So let me do read line, and then do the same thing again, the exact same idea here. So if I run it, I've got line 1 and then line 2. You can also see that I've got a big gap after it, and that's because at the end of each line, it keeps track of the fact that there is the end of a line. I'll get more into that in a future lesson, but at the moment, you can see it's printing out the first line and then printing out the second line. If I accidentally forgot to put that print statement in and got Python to read the first line and then printed out the second line, it would only print out the second line rather than the other lines. This bit of code still runs in the background. It just doesn't do anything with that information because we haven't told it to print it, we haven't told it to save it anywhere, we haven't told it to put it into a variable or anything like that. We've just said text.readline and it's printing out the line. Okay. Other things we can do, we can create a list from our text files. So we can save into a variable a list of lines that are in the text file. So this makes it easier to do things with, as you can just treat it the same way as we've been treating the lists in the last few lessons. So with open example.txt as file, the file content is equal to file.read and list of lines. So again, these could be called whatever you want, but just as long as you've referred to them the right way, you could just say content and lines instead of file content and list of lines to save the amount of typing that you've got to do. But just to make it really clear to you what's going on here, file content is file.read, and then list of lines is file content dot split lines. So it's splitting your list of your text file, all of the different lines that you've got, into different lines, and then it's saving them into a list. Now that's not very obvious from this word here, split lines, but that is what it's doing. Now obviously this could just be simplified to file.read.splitlines. As long as you've got all the brackets in the right place, that will do exactly the same thing as this one here. Okay, and you can then do exactly the same things that you've done with all of the lists that we've been working on the last few weeks, to be able to work with them and read from them and do things with them. Okay. So just a moment, let me make sure you understand how it works with Trinket. So I've got my main.py and my file.txt. You can do your same idea here, line 1, line 2, line 3. I mean, I could say apples, oranges, lemons, whatever it is you're having in your file, you can have that as a list, right? So with open file.txt and then comma R to make sure it knows that we're using it in read mode, and then as file, again you can call this whatever you want, colon, so that it goes into that indent there. Now this gets saved automatically, so you don't have to click save or anything like that. Trinket will do that for you. But with open file.txt as file, lines equals file.read.split lines. Okay, now I'm doing this relatively quickly so that I can get you to have a go at these yourself. So file.read.split lines, and then what it will do, I've opened the file, I've closed it because I'm no longer in that level of indentation, and then what will happen is I can then say print lines, and I'll say the first line, which would be line 0, because remember we count from 0 in lists, don't we? So run that, apples. Now that was the first line, wasn't it? I could say lines 2, because that would be the third item in the list. It would print out lemons. So hopefully you can kind of see that I can just treat whatever I've got here in the same way as I would create a list or have a list created. Now, time for you to get something done. So I want you to be able to send me 2 tasks. So a reminder, if you're using Trinket, then you'll probably want to go to jump2.cc/python-new. I'll put that in the chat to as a quick reminder of how to get there. And then when you press enter, it will usually bring you to a brand new Python thing. Sometimes it might bring you to one you've already created in the past. And then once you've done that, you can always share with me the link, but you have to send this link to me via Show My Homework. So copy this link and just paste it into Show My Homework. That will allow me to see your code, to see you and be able to run it as well. And so yeah, have a go at the following tasks. So create a text file with some lines of data, might be your favorite computer games, their price and year of sale or something like that. And create a program which uses the with statement that reads that text file and prints each line one after the other. So you'll probably need to look back at this PowerPoint, which has actually been uploaded already into the tiny URL. So I'll post a link to that as well. So it's in practical intermediate programming. That's all in there. So this PowerPoint that we've been looking at today, that is all in here as well. And the PowerPoints that we were looking at last week are all here as well, or the last couple of weeks. Okay, they're all here too. Okay, so hopefully that's useful to you, that those can be helpful for you. The second program I'd like you to create is one that asks the user to enter the name of one of the games in the file. It will then search the text file and it will print out the line of the text file which matches to the screen. So you might need to look back at the lists tasks or the lists PowerPoint to do these tasks, this one in particular. So asks the user to enter the name of one of the games in the file. Does that text file, does that line exist? And then it'll print out the line of that text file which matches. Okay, so have a go. Just gonna get some music on. Hopefully you'll all get sending me some of these things. Okay. Right, so I think what I'll actually do, because there's particular things that I want you to be doing, and effectively that's what I want you to be just getting on with and sending me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just finish off the lesson there, where I make sure you actually complete this in your own time, but I will be available over the next hour or two, available on Satchel 1 straight away to answer your questions, available on Show My Homework. So if you have any particular questions that you want to get answered, please let me know. But hopefully, in today's lesson, you've been able to have a look at all of the different ideas with regards to reading from a text file, and you've been able to understand the different methods used to interact with lists in Python. Sorry, that was from last lesson. You've been able to understand how to read from a file in Python, and you've been able to understand how to convert a file's contents into a list. Please feel free to look back through the PowerPoints that are on the Tiny URL in order to complete these tasks. But I do expect you just to get on with that and to send me that work. Please pester me to put up the points. I know I've been quite slow at putting those up, so I do apologize about that. Please pester me to put those up. I will put those up. And those of you who have said that you're here in the chat, I will put your points up as well. And if you put up your work on these two things, then you will get an extra 2 points, one for this one. So you'll get your contribution to the lesson point if you have completed this first task, and you'll get your excellent work point if you have completed the second task. Doesn't sound too difficult, so I hope you are able to complete those, send them to me, get them all sent off. I will, in the meantime, try and get these points up from last time and from this time as well. Please let me know if you have any issues on Show My Homework. Okay, I will see you next week. We'll be continuing to work on the idea of file handling, and we'll be continuing to work on looking into a bit more depth about how to write to a text file and maybe even append to a text file. So have a go at that. Keep on going. But I will be ending it there, because otherwise I'm just sitting here doing nothing. Whereas I could be responding to you on Show My Homework instead. Okay. Have a lovely week. See you later. Bye.